Firstly, thanks to the GP Tech organizers for accepting our abstract. It's exciting to present what has been a labor of love for the past 18 months and is finally going to see the light of day next month. So Inspire HCP are accredited activity providers under the RACGP, QI, and CPD program. So our focus very much is on continuing professional development, but I hope you'll find some application to obviously earlier training to what I'm about to present. I attended Victoria Brazil's presentation this morning, and I was a little bit intimidated because she's such an expert in simulation. And I was waiting for that moment where she'd present something, and I'd say, oh, great, so she's just rubbished what we've been working on, and then I'd have to cancel the presentation. I was delighted to find, though, that in fact, a lot of the themes that she presented, we were exploring as well. So it was actually a bit validating in terms of creativity versus discipline, and not just doing something just because you can and because the technology is there to do it, exploring the unknown unknowns, and also measuring outcomes. So I thought I'd start before presenting what we've developed by talking about a few of the challenges that precipitated our focus on simulation. And first, a qualifier. We're not saying that this is the first simulation ever invented. We know it's been around for decades and across industries like aviation, defense, medicine, construction. But as technology evolves, we think that the potential of simulation continues to expand, and it still remains largely untapped in terms of powering continuing professional development and education in primary care. Now, in medical education, one of the things that has been an ongoing bugbear is the measure of effectiveness, in particular in continuing professional development, because much of the measures that we get back are highly subjective, self-appraisals, basic assessments that may tell us that the information's been imparted, but nothing about what's happened after that. There are activity structures such as clinical audits, which provide us more robust measures of objective data in terms of performance. But we also found that the more higher the administrative burden on GPs to complete an activity, the fewer GPs completed them. And the lower the administrative requirements, the higher the uptake, but then the lower the measures. So finding a way to measure effectiveness that didn't put an increased burden on GPs was certainly an incentive for us. The other was, again, a form of measure in terms of identifying what we have done to achieve bridging that knowledge action gap. So great if the knowledge has been imparted, but have we actually changed behavior or attitudes? Now, we know that interaction is the gold standard of medical education, but we also know that many participants in an interactive environment can simply go with the flow without ever fully interrogating their own behaviors, attitudes, and beliefs. The other issue is this. Ooh. The sound doesn't work. That's the issue. And this is my
we know there's some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
That is probably the only time I'd ever bring myself to quote Donald Rumsfeld, but I just love the way he put it, and it's the truth, is part of education is trying to help people discover their unknown unknowns, and a lot of the traditional formats we found limited our ability to do that. So the idea is to look at simulation as an effective teaching strategy. Oh, I'm now looking like this. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to read off the slide for a minute. This is the slide which basically tells you that what Victoria already highlighted with her Google search and the 3 million results is that there's a tremendous amount of research that demonstrates that simulation is an effective teaching tool. Oh, thank you. You mean the big screen in front of me? Okay, awesome. Thank you. As you can see, I do this a lot. So this probably isn't telling you anything you already know. The measures are there. But what I really love is that the Chinese proverb, which has been oft repeated, is the I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. And so the idea of simulation to get people into the doing is what was really inviting. But simulation is also supplemental. So what we're not presenting is the idea isn't this is the end-all be-all that we have discovered it, we have discovered, and we are evolving something. And the idea is that simulation unto itself isn't anything unless it is rounded out by other education interventions and debriefs. Debriefs are absolutely critical in terms of putting the information into context. And somebody had said earlier, in general practice, it really is rarely a black and white, right or wrong, yes or no. It's up to the clinical judgment of the general practitioner, and providing a context where they can discuss amongst peers the learning and putting things and discussing, and those discussions and the sharing of stories is really where the greatest value comes into play. I am clicking. Okay. But now I pointed in the right direction. We're good? So SimGP, the aspiration was to create an interface that GPs actually wanted to participate, that didn't feel laborious, and they also felt they got value out of, in terms of it's not, yes, knowledge was imparted, but I got a greater understanding in terms of my own approach to different scenarios, and I got a measure in terms of what I've learned as a result of having participated in the activity, and dare I say it, even maybe a little bit fun. We wanted an interface that was consistent with a standard consult, so it's timed, and I'll talk about that more in a minute. Video-based patient interactions instead of the use of avatars, so they have the experience of looking at the screen and the patient is looking at them and talking to them and answering questions, and trying to make it as real-world as possible. Obvious alignment with MBS, PBS, and Australian guidelines, and the use of it online, face-to-face, and also as a blended learning tool. And ultimately, that effectiveness measure both for the participant as well as for the educator. In terms of the learning interventions, they consist of structured individualized feedback reports, which report back on the activities undertaken, but then also in comparison to peers in an aggregate level. Targeted education that then supports whatever the scenario was meant to convey, and then ultimately a debrief where GPs can then discuss amongst their peers with a trained facilitator the outcome on an aggregate fashion so nobody feels singled out. The components. Now, what we're launching in October is what's called a Category 2 activity, so it's not as expansive as this, but this would be more of the Category 1 offering, which would include a predisposing self-efficacy questionnaire. What do you think you do well? What do you think your weaknesses are? The simulated consultations, the education intervention, the debrief, and then most importantly, a repeat of those simulations, so that there's an actual comparison between the baseline and then the result following the education. We want to be able to measure for them and also ourselves what has been achieved as a result of participating in this activity. Oh, okay, now, can I go back? Thank you. Awesome. Okay, because this starts automatically, so I just need to catch my breath for a second. So what this is a sample of the interface, assuming that 2 of the scenarios had already been completed. Now here, the patient interaction needs to be played first before you can access any of the other functionality. You have to sit, you have to look, and you have to listen. Once the presentation is complete, go for your life. You can go in any order. Here we've selected Ask a Question. This is a constrained list. The final will be much longer. And then you can complete screeners as though the patient were with you, and the screeners would appear along with the answers. You can then access patient records and look at their history. You can look at their current treatments, their past treatments, past investigations, and click through to see what the results were. Past visits, and scroll through your notes for the full history of that patient and the notes you took on the day, and any correspondence, which in this case there was none. The important thing to note is, and I'm not sure if I'll just play it again for a second, is in the corner there's a, oh, no. There we go. In the corner there was a timer, and that's because the interaction is constrained to 15 minutes. You can take 2 hours if you want to, but that's part of the feedback because GPs don't have 2 hours typically in a consultation. So time is limited, and so while the potential of what can be done is expansive, they need to be sure to focus on the time available. Now, in terms of examinations, this has been replaced by a body that's actually more representative of the patient. But as an example, the idea is you can select the body and then click on different parts of the body for either an audio, visual, or a text-based status on the patient. So for heart, you can actually listen to the chest, and pulse, you can also see a rhythm of the beat, so you can assess the pulse directly. You can select pathology tests, imaging tests, specialist referrals, and then complete the consultation. Once you complete the consultation, the patient comes back because you don't get results the same second that you request them. So the patient returns along with any new additional information that would be relevant, and then after the patient presentation, you can access the patient records. And that's where you would look to find things like the results from the x-ray that you ordered or the correspondence from the respiratory physician along with the results of that referral. So the funny thing is we're about to launch this, but the critical thing to communicate is this has been an ongoing learning experience because we're launching it, I guess, version 1.0, knowing that there's already one critical flaw to the format of this simulation. And I'm not going to ask you what it is because you probably found a lot of flaws. But, but the big one was when we were testing this, because at every stage we have been working with a steering committee of GPs, and we've been testing this among GPs. And the first thing that came back only just now was, why am I listening to the patient first? I would never just let the patient walk in. I'd be looking at their records, and I would evaluate, refresh my memory about who they are, why they're here, what I should be looking out for. So why can't I access their records before I actually have to hear why the patient's presenting? Oh, good point. So this really is an ongoing learning experience for us. But we're getting there. Oops. How am I doing for time? Perfect. The other thing that attracted us to simulation is the domains of general practice, and the idea that we can move beyond applied knowledge, but we can start to incorporate things like patient interaction, legal dimensions, if there's reporting requirements depending upon what the scenario is, preventative activities, family history, and the influence on health. So the potential we feel is still largely untapped in terms of a general practice context, and we look forward to exploring that further. So the lessons we've learned so far: primary care is ridiculously hard to simulate. So we're not by any stretch of the imagination saying that we've nailed it. We just think that we've done something hopefully to progress it and to do more that GPs can get greater value out of interacting with. Time is really important, both as a constraint and the time that people need to invest in figuring out how to use something, not just the interaction itself. Diverse range of input, making sure that the input is provided by a range of GPs from a range of areas and a range of skills, and also specialist input as well as the rest of the practice team and nurses and allied stakeholders. And then constraining feedback is more important than constraining options. We had a lot of discussions about should we allow doctors to ask for an MRI for a 12-year-old who presents with a cold. And the answer we came up with is yes, you can do anything in this simulation, and you can do it as often as you want, and you will get results back. But if you order an MRI that was completely and wholly not relevant to the simulation, the feedback you'll get is, we need more information as to why you think this was indicated. We're not going to simulate the full report, but we will allow for that option, so there is a freer form, a more expansive feeling in terms of the interaction. And so, as I said, through the Australian Medical Association, their online doctor portal, we are launching a Category 2, which is our first to put into practice on a larger scale the activity and to see what comes of it. Okay, I'm done. So if you want more information, you can either go to simgp.com.au. More information on the company is there as well, and I'll be there. I can give you my card if you're interested, and I hope that was useful. Thank you.